Jagatiya Jwalamukhi. Hey guys, today we are talking about Devi Jwalamukhi from Dr. Kinsley's book. I drew these eyes back in the day, and now it's a representation of Naina Devi. That was a devotional song from India. There is a story associated with the Jwalamukhi temple in Himachal Pradesh that features a head offering. So, in the previous chapter of this book on tantric visions of the divine feminine, Dr. David Kinsley talks about the Mahavidyas being less associated with sacred geography in comparison to other divine images of India, divine feminine of India, and he quotes from Diana Eck, who is a queer professor of HDS. So, the Mahavidyas are also less associated with fecundity and maternal aspects of the feminine. So if you want a child, you would not go to the Mahavidyas. That was the previous chapter. And Shiva is considered lesser as like one of the chair legs or part of the seat of the some of the Mahavidyas. So that was in one of the chapters, and this chapter is about Chintapurni or Chinnamasta. There's also a story associated with the Jwalamukhi temple in Himachal Pradesh. A devotee of the goddess Jwalamukhi named Dhyanu wished to visit her temple, but was prohibited to enter by the Emperor Akbar, who claimed the goddess had no power. The emperor permitted Dhyanu to proceed if he agreed to leave his horse behind and permit Akbar to kill it. If the goddess was able to revive the horse Akbar said, he would spare Dhanu's life. Riz God show. Swarup 1K, hi. Hi. Dhanu accepted the challenge. Akbar duly killed the horse and locked the body in a room. So by the way, in Atlanta, someone actually killed a horse and left it on the streets. So this is kind of relevant in 2025. At Jwalamukhi's temple, Dhyanu did devotion to the goddess, but she did not appear or answer his pleas to prove her power to Emperor Akbar. In desperation, Dhyanu decided to offer his own head to the goddess. Taking a sword, he was about to cut off his head when she appeared and granted him the boon of restoring his horse to life. In some versions of the tale, Dhyanu actually cuts off his head, which the goddess subsequently restores. This is the version usually shown in pictures. Dhyanu kneeling in front of the goddess, offering her his head on a platter. Just outside the entrance of the Bajreshwari Devi temple in Kangra is a sculpted head said to be that of Dhyanu. A large tableau in a recessed niche of the temple also depicts this incident. Dhyanu kneels before the goddess holding his severed head in his two hands. The practice of cutting out one's tongue, I was told, is done to this day at Jwalamukhi temple. Just as the goddess restored Dhanu's head, so she is supposed to restore the devotee's tongue in recognition of his or her devotion. A story similar to Dhanu's is associated with the Maihar Devi temple near Allahabad in Uttar Pradesh, otherwise known as the United Provinces. Once upon a time, there was a wrestler who wished to achieve supremacy in his chosen vocation, Pehlwan. Pehlwan Sa propitiated the goddess for a long time, but she did not appear to him. In desperation and determination, he cut his own head off as a final act of devotion to her. The goddess then appeared and, pleased with his devotional sincerity, reattached his head. So in this part of Tokyo Revengers, we are encountering the Headless Angel gang. Okay, in the Chinnamasta icon, the theme of devotional head offering to a goddess is, of course, reversed. It is the goddess who offers her head to her devotees, who in turn sometimes seem to be offering heads to her. The self decapitating impulse is attributed to the goddess herself rather than to her devotees. Heads as power objects. The Chinnamasta icon raises questions about detached heads, which also play an important role in the iconography and sadhana of other Mahavidyas. Kali, Tara, and others often wear garlands of severed heads or skulls. Tara's crest is decorated with skulls. Kali and Tara nearly always hold a freshly severed head in one hand. The heads are often said to have belonged to enemies who were killed by the goddess in question. But sometimes they are said to represent the letters of the alphabet, particularly when the heads number 50 or 52 are threaded as a garland around a goddess's neck. Oh my gosh. As sounds or letters, they are sometimes referred to as matrikas, mothers. They give birth to the creation in the form of sound, that is. They are also said to represent, especially in the case of Kali and Tara, who hold heads in their lower left hand, the chopped off bonds that prevented a sadhaka from achieving spiritual success. Heads, or more usually skulls, are also commonly used in tantric sadhana. The cremation ground at Tarapet in Bengal is highly favored by tantrikas, partly because of the ready availability of both skulls and corpses. As many as 60% of the dead here are buried rather than cremated. I don't know where he gets that number, but that's the number he gives. One scholar comments, the disruption of graves also leads to the digging up of many human skulls. Mundasa asanas, or seats on skulls, are the most favored asanas for tantric sadhana, and their availability in a place heightens the attraction to the sadhakas. In Tarapet, about 10 sadhus of various kinds reside in and around the cremation ground, some of whom collect the skulls for use in their daily routines. Most have 5 neatly arranged skulls in their huts, each decorated with flowers and a tilaka colored marking between the eyebrows or sockets in this case. So like your eyes, like this part, it can actually accommodate those like nimbus that you find in India. So that's pretty cool. Which means lemons. Okay. One sadhu had built an entire wall of his hut out of skulls using mud as mortar. And another wandered about the village with a skull as a begging bowl. It seems clear that in some sense, skulls and severed heads are power objects containing special qualities, particularly for ritual purposes. Their use in iconography to represent letters or sounds, the seeds from which all creation proceeds, is no doubt connected to the head and mouth as the source of language or sound. The head, as the chief of the body's parts, also houses the person's essential being. Without the head, a person is without identity. This is made clear in stories concerning transposed heads, in which the identity of the person follows the head, not the rest of the body. In some cases, devotees may use skulls as seats, bowls, or ritual implements as in imitation of Shiva himself as Kapalika, the one who bears a skull. In this case, the skull represents something powerfully polluted because in Shaivite mythology, the skull is that of Brahma, whom Shiva had decapitated. It represents the heinous crime of Brahmacide and sticks to Shiva's hand until, after eons, he atones for his act. Skulls and severed heads also may represent the forbidden. They are out of place, liminal objects. They belong somewhere else with a body. They are out of bounds. Swarup. Stars Kandi, hello. One could say he was ahead of his time. I don't know. G. Combat said that about someone. Anyways. They are out of bounds, which is where tantric sadhakas want to get. There, out of bounds, sadhakas can transform themselves unhampered by social limits and constraints. The chopped off head, 1111, we have one viewer, also may represent liberation, a particular state of expanded, awakened consciousness. This interpretation is particularly likely in the Buddhist context, which we will discuss below, overcoming desire. Another particularly striking feature of Chinnamasta icon is often mentioned in her dhyana mantras and stotras. She stands on the copulating couple Kama and Rati. Kama, whose name means desire of this type, and Rati, whose name means intercourse, are almost always shown having this activity with Rati on top, the same position Kali assumes with Shiva. They are usually shown lying on a lotus, but sometimes on a cremation pyre. They are quite two different interpretations of this aspect of Chinnamasta iconography. One interpretation understands it as a symbol of control of sexual desire, the other as a symbol of goddess's embodiment of energy. Certainly, the most common interpretation of Chinnamasta standing, or sometimes sitting, on Kama and Rati is that she is defeating what they represent, namely desire, energy, force. She symbolizes self-control, which must be achieved before undertaking successful yogic practice. Swami Annapurnananda of the Ramakrishna Math in Varanasi told me that Chinnamasta sacrifices herself. She sacrifices herself to her devotees in a great act of love for them, and is able to do this because she has overcome or controlled sexual and selfish desires, as is symbolized by her standing on Kama and Rati. She represents yoga control and repression of sexual energy. In her 100-name hymn in Shakta Pramoda, she is called Yogini and Yoganirata. Yoganirata, she who practices yoga, or female yogi. The same hymn also calls her Madanatura, she who cannot be overcome by kama, suggesting her control of desire. In her hymn of 1,000 names, she is called Yoga Marga Pradayani, she who bestows the yogic path. Name 745. Yoga Gamaya, follower of yoga. Yoga Mayi, she who embodies yoga. And Yoga Ananda Pradayini. Yoga Ananda Pradayini, she who gives bliss through yoga. One commentator on this aspect of the Chinnamasta icon has argued that her worship is particularly appropriate for those in the military. Oh my God. Military, an effective warrior must overcome lust and the desire to engage in sexual play before committing himself to battle. In battle, he must cultivate an attitude of self-surrender so that he can give his body, his life, freely for the benefit of others. Both of these themes are embodied in Chinnamasta. Her control is represented by her standing, and her perfection of self-surrender, fearlessness of death, and self-sacrifice for others. The same commentator says that devotion to Chinnamasta is both dangerous and rare. It is dangerous because it demands much of the devotee, namely renouncing sexual desire and cultivating self-surrender. He also says that only those of heroic nature worship Chinnamasta, and those of heroic nature are apt to be found in the military. Her nudity, according to this commentator, represents truthfulness and heedlessness, yielding oneself to danger for others. The worshipper of Chinnamasta perfects self-control, if not self-annihilation, and in this way becomes a very effective warrior. Her thousand-name hymn, in fact, calls her Ranotkanta, which means battle cry, like the Indian battle cry. Ranasta, battlefield. Rana Jaitri, victorious in war, named 772. It also calls her the slayer of various demons. Sexual vitality. A quite different interpretation of the presence of Kama and Rati in the Chinnamasta icon emphasizes that the goddess is being charged with the power of the copulating couple. On the analogy of a lotus seed conferring its qualities and power on a deity, Chinnamasta may be thought of as acquiring the energy of the couple whom she stands or sits on, surging up through her body, which is usually described as a naked 16-year-old. That energy gushes out of her head in the form of blood to feed her devotees and replenish herself. In this interpretation of couple is not opposed to the goddess, but an integral part of a rhythmic flow of energy symbolized by sex and blood. Reinforcing this interpretation are images or descriptions of Chinnamasta sitting rather than standing on Rati and Kama. So my image is standing. I don't know what the sitting one looks like actually. Okay, we have it here, and I think I'll end it here. Here is the image of her sitting. I think this is also the cover of this book. Okay, please support this publication. Thanks so much. Bye.